I want to start off today with discussing a little bit of my weekend. I was talking to a couple friends this weekend, not necessarily about politics, but in one case especially so. And a lot of it had to do with the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. And with one of them, this had nothing to do with politics. It actually had to do with poetry. This is a friend of mine who's middle-aged, probably 20 years older than me, who was talking about how he judges poets. And I asked him, it happened to be, I read a poem that was featured in the 12 Rules for Life with Jordan Peterson, which I didn't bring up, not that it would have mattered. And it's called The Second Coming by William Butler Yeats. And it goes like this: turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold, mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Surely some revelation is at hand. Surely the second coming is at hand. The second coming, hardly are those words out, when a vast image out of spiritus mundi troubles my sight, a waste of desert sand, a shape with lion body and the head of a man. A gaze blank and pitiless as the sun is moving its slow thighs, while all about it wind shadows of the indignant desert birds. The darkness drops again, but now I know that 20 centuries of stony sleep were vexed to nightmare by a rocking cradle, and what rough beast, its hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. Now, Butler Yeats was really writing in the aftermath of World War I, and probably, in his estimation, and as well during the political revolutions of the time, and he was an Irishman, so he witnessed for the first time Ireland throwing off the British crown. So for him, of course, those years were major tectonic movements of the map that he probably wouldn't have predicted when he was born in the 1860s. So I wanted to talk about this in about as concrete a form as I could, without necessarily making it about who people really support or don't support. But it's not going to be able to work out that way. The fact is that we have, as Butler Yeats is talking about, things fall apart, the center cannot hold. And really, that's just about as good of a summary of our times as any. Just in the past couple of days, there was an article that was released claiming that Hillary Clinton would win a rematch of the 2016 election in a landslide. And I was talking this weekend with another friend, along the same lines, about really who defines what we are as voters. And we were discussing all the way back to the Bush administration and the first Bush administration, and probably beyond that, in reverse, in my case, all the way back to 1948. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people don't gravitate towards ideas. They gravitate towards personalities. They gravitate towards the people that make them feel more connected to the leadership. And I feel that when you look at polling, we'll get to that polling today as well, it does not tell the picture of why Hillary Clinton lost that election in 2016. The reality is that a lot of people decided in 1992, that was the first election that I remember, I grew up in the 90s, and a lot of people really chose to vote for Bill Clinton because he had that common touch. He could connect with the average voter, the average person on the street. And George H.W. Bush was he was older, he was more obviously patrician, and he simply couldn't get it done. And we're going to look at some of the monologue from Stephen Colbert's show and see exactly what we're talking about. Well, the difference between Hillary Clinton and her husband Bill.
Ladies and gentlemen, folks, my first guest tonight is the most qualified candidate to answer all of my questions about what is going on in Washington. Please welcome Hillary Rodham Clinton. There's some Hillary Rodham Clinton fans out here tonight, and it could be they could be your fans for a lot of different reasons, because reading your CV or reminding people of your accomplishments is almost insulting to you, because we are the first female presidential nominee from a major political party, winner of the popular vote in 2016. Secretary of State, New York Senator, First Lady, author of 7 books. And you're here tonight because the paperback release of your 7th book, What Happened? What Happened? Okay. And you left out one of the words. What? Or two. Two words you can't say on CBS. Now, you've got, there's an afterword in here. There's a new afterword here, and it's...
So we're not going to go through that entire interview because, honestly, how much more of it can you take? But you notice a few issues, really indicating why some people can't relate to Hillary Clinton just in there. And if you voted for Hillary Clinton, I want you to kind of just pay attention to what I'm saying. And if you can't relate to it, then, you're different from some other people. First of all, you see him helping her onto the stage. That happened... See here? So you can see him actually steadying her stride. It's known that Hillary Clinton does have issues with falling. Those of you that think that that's a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. It's been reported by regular mainstream media that she has had falling episodes and strokes and things like that. So one of the reasons that people are not allowed to talk about this, and when you tell people not to talk about something, it creates almost this voyeuristic effect on it. Another thing that people can't relate to, Stephen Colbert recited a whole laundry list of Hillary Clinton's accomplishments, except they're not accomplishments. Hillary Clinton, the election result is, so to speak, the only accomplishment there, where she was able to be nominated and also to win the popular vote. I think that one, let's not split hairs on that one. She did win the popular vote, and she did win the Democratic nomination. If you look at it narrowly and you don't believe a lot of the complaints about irregularities. However, all the things about her being Secretary of State and Senator, and of course First Lady, and being a partner. I don't think he mentioned her being a partner at the Rose Law Firm. I believe the first female partner at the Rose Law Firm. A lot of those things are firsts, but they're not accomplishments. As Secretary of State, your accomplishments are defined by how you improve the United States' relations with the rest of the world. And I can definitively say that after 4 years of Hillary Clinton, the American standing in the world was not much better. We didn't have a better relationship with Russia or with China or with most of the other countries that are important to our international relations. Of course, she was very close to the liberal order of Europe. And we can see now that in our times, that order is being rejected by the popular voters of Europe, whether it's right-wing voters in places like Austria or Hungary or Italy, or it's left-wing voters in places like Greece. So we can see, if we really assess what happened, that's the real what happened. What happened under Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State? They were not good things. What happened under Hillary Clinton as a senator from New York? This is a person who did vote for the Iraq War. And this is really what sets her apart from her husband. And we'll get into that. Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill, had a unique way of reaching out to voters and really seeing how he could tailor his policies in order to get more votes. I don't think that's the best way to govern. I think sometimes that borders on basically being a populist and a weather vane, and just whoring yourself out for the vote. But Bill Clinton knew how to do that, and anybody who believes, and I don't think people would dispute, anybody who believes that Bill Clinton was not a good politician, was not a brilliant tactician, knew how to talk to people, knew how to connect to the audience, knew how to reach the common man, you're not being honest with yourself. You might just be a partisan Republican. Because I can say, as somebody who's criticized Bill Clinton, I've read dozens of books about him and of course his wife. I can say that Bill Clinton, whatever you want to say about him, was a roaring success as a politician, even if he did a lot of crooked things. So let's take a look at that poll and see exactly what it says in the statistics. So they say that Hillary would beat Trump in a landslide. But if you look at the sample sizes, you see that they chose, out of 1,000 voters, they chose 50 more Democrats than Republicans, a 370 to 320 oversample. Then you can see that they chose 415 to 374 in terms of people who voted for the other side, for each side. So again, they oversample Clinton voters. They just did. So yes, Hillary Clinton, if you sample more Clinton voters than Trump voters, then you are going to get more people that are going to vote for Hillary Clinton this time around than last time around. Okay, that's just a fact. And that's really the problem that people are having. And it's not just people on the right. People are tired of Hillary Clinton being shoved into their face like there's some sort of child eating baby food. Okay, and I'll tell you what. The change in political attitudes in America can be examined in several states. And today, I've done Arkansas in the past. I've talked about Ohio, which is my state. I believe I've talked about Florida as well. Let's talk about Tennessee today. And why Tennessee? You can see in 1993 that Bill Clinton won Tennessee by a healthy margin, 47 to 42, partially because his running mate was Al Gore, who was from Tennessee and whose dad was a senator from Tennessee just like him. Then you go to 1996, and the margin had shrunk a little more, even though you had Bob Dole, who was a weaker presidential candidate than George Bush, if we're being honest. You go to 2000, the pendulum swung towards the Republicans. What the hell happened there? Okay, and for the first time, the Republicans, for the first time in a while, they earned over 1 million votes in Tennessee, something that Clinton himself never succeeded in doing. So let's look at the pattern here. Tennessee, since Bill Clinton, has never voted for a Democrat for president. And those people who try to say, well, there was a Southern strategy or whatever, well, why did they vote for Bill Clinton in 2000? Why did they vote for Jimmy Carter in 1976? And you can just see that the trend has gotten worse and worse for Democrats. Even Barack Obama, who was a pretty good He was good at connecting at voters too. Even rural white voters in some states like Indiana could connect to Barack Obama. You saw that under, President Bush, of course, defeated John Kerry by a wide margin in 2004. By then it was kind of cemented. John Kerry, the Northern Democrat, could not connect to the Southern rural voters of Tennessee. If you go and look at Hillary Clinton, does Hillary Clinton strike you as a Southern Democrat of the mold of her husband, Bill? Well, if so, then why did she run for Senate in New York? Why didn't she run for Senate in Arkansas like her husband did? The answer is that she would have lost because she wasn't exactly well-liked in the state of Arkansas. And it's shown by the fact that she's never made an attempt, she's never made an effort to connect to the Arkansas voters. In fact, Jimmy Carter, who was rather, he was unpopular when he was running for re-election, did much better than many of his northern opponents, Walter Mondale and Michael Dukakis. He barely lost the state to Ronald Reagan in 1980. And it could be attributed that some of the votes that would have gone to Jimmy Carter went to the third-party candidate, John Anderson, who was an independent. Now, as we see going after George Bush, even Barack Obama, who was very good at garnering votes, even in places that were traditionally a little more conservative, he earned 1 million votes in Tennessee in 2008. Okay, and John McCain still won by a substantial margin, 56 to about 42. Then you had him in 2012 losing by a much larger margin to Mitt Romney, because in Tennessee, I don't believe that people started jumping on the bandwagon throughout Barack Obama's term. And then you get to 2016, when Donald Trump broke all records for voting in Tennessee. He earned more votes in Tennessee than any politician of all time. Okay, and I know some of you are going to be asking, why does it matter? Why does it matter to us what happened in Tennessee? I mean, yes, the South is almost solidly Republican at this point, apart from Virginia and to some extent North Carolina. So why should anybody care? I'll tell you why. Because Bill Clinton in the 90s, he had the touch, he had the moxie to go to those Southern voters and say, well, I will create an economy that will be good for all Americans. It will be inclusive. It will provide jobs for the middle class, the lower class. It will bring Tennessee to the 21st century. Okay, that was what Bill Clinton could do. Bill Clinton built the center. And what happened was that under Al Gore started to destroy the center. He was not a politician who knew how to connect to the actual voter. Why was he destroying the center? It wasn't because Al Gore, who, by the way, is the reason I'm not a Democrat. It wasn't because he was necessarily a complete idiot, so to speak, in this case. But Al Gore's lack of actual connection to regular people, the fact that he'd been vice president for 8 years, the fact that in many ways he was behaving just like the Northern Democrats that had been rejected under Reagan, the Walter Mondales and Michael Dukakises. That's what began to lose Tennessee. Also, there were plenty of allegations that he had connections to all sorts of nefarious characters in Tennessee, but he lost his own home state in 2000. Let's look at the 2000 election. And Tennessee, you have 11 electoral votes. And in the broader presidential election, if Al Gore would have won his own home state, then it's possible that Florida wouldn't have mattered. In fact, he would have had 277 electoral votes, even with the crazy shit in Florida. And it wouldn't have mattered that George Bush had won Florida or had won Ohio. The fact is that with Al Gore, you do see the beginning of the erosion of the liberal left center, the people that could say, well, we're calling for progress and we're calling for change, but we're going to try to connect that change to the average person. I'm not trying to say that Bill Clinton was a good president because of that. I'm saying that he was able to connect with people because that's what he conveyed. And in fact, how about we listen to Bill Clinton's speech?
Let me ask you on the subject of what to do with the undocumented immigrants. Take a listen to President Bill Clinton at the 1995 State of the Union address.
All Americans, not only in the states most heavily affected, but in every place in this country, are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public service they use impose burdens on our taxpayers. That's why our administration has moved aggressively to secure our borders more, by hiring a record number of new border guards, by deporting twice as many criminal aliens as ever before, by cracking down on illegal hiring, by barring welfare benefits to illegal aliens.
As a policy matter, how is that different from what Donald Trump is proposing?
Donald Trump is proposing to deport 4 million U.S.-born children of undocumented parents. Donald Trump believes that you cannot do anything in this country, basically, if you're an undocumented immigrant. Donald Trump has said that he's going to repeal the Dreamer program. So that young woman I read about recently who was the top of her class, a dreamer who started, I think, at Yale, she's out of luck. Donald Trump, has said that Mexicans are rapists and murderers, or rapists and drug dealers. And you judge a person by their actions. And Donald Trump has repeatedly sent a very clear signal. And when you're hanging out with the likes of Joe Arpaio, you're sending a very clear signal to the Latino community that, you know what, I'm not with you. I mean, if you're waiting for Donald Trump, if you're holding your breath for Donald Trump to come up with a sensible Latino outreach strategy or African-American outreach strategy, you're going to die of asphyxia because he doesn't have one.
Tom Perez, the Labor Secretary, who's here in his personal capacity.
So yes, this was in 2016. This was before Tom Perez was elected chair of the DNC. This was him trying to deflect criticism that Donald Trump was essentially echoing what Bill Clinton said in 1996. But if you really assess what Tom Perez said, he said that Donald Trump's actions really defined who he is. But all he mentioned were things that Donald Trump had said. Whereas Bill Clinton was one of the presidents that said, he had said that a border wall was on the table. He had promoted this idea that illegal aliens are not supposed to be in this country, that they do harm the labor force of native-born Americans. So another issue that I think people should bear in mind when they're talking about why is Hillary Clinton actually not electable is the whole gun debate. Hillary Clinton, and we'll watch this clip now. Background.
It's essential that we stop terrorists from getting the tools they need to carry out the attacks. And that is especially true when it comes to assault weapons like those used in Orlando and San Bernardino. I believe weapons
So that's my Senator Sherrod Brown in the background.
of war have no place on our streets. We may have our disagreements about gun safety regulations, but we should all be able to agree on a few essential things. If the FBI is watching you for suspected terrorist links, you shouldn't be able to just go buy a gun with no questions asked. And you shouldn't be able to exploit loopholes and evade criminal background checks by buying online or at a gun show. And yes, if you're too dangerous to get on a plane, you are too dangerous to buy a gun in America. Now, I know some will say that assault weapons and background checks are totally separate issues having nothing to do with terrorism. Well, in Orlando and San Bernardino, terrorists used assault weapons, the AR-15, and they used it to kill Americans. That was the same assault weapon used to kill those little children in Sandy Hook. We have to make it harder for people who should not have those weapons of war. And that may not stop every shooting or every terrorist attack, but it will stop some, and it will save lives, and it will protect our first responders. And I want you to know, I'm not going to stop fighting for these kinds of provisions.
So essentially, Hillary Clinton's proudest moment,
Delano Roosevelt once said, I ask you to judge me by the enemies I have made. You've all made a few people upset over your political careers. Which enemy are you most proud of? Secretary Clinton?
Well, in addition to the NRA, the health insurance companies, the drug companies, the Iranians, probably the Republicans.
So she actually noted before Iran, before the health insurance companies, who I don't really think the health insurance companies consider Hillary Clinton to be their enemy, but she mentioned the NRA first and foremost. And if you look at this map over here, these are the states with the most gun owners, and Tennessee is near the higher end. Okay, they are towards about 40% to 50% of the population. Actually, more than 40% of the population of Tennessee probably owns a gun. Okay, you get to her husband's home state, Arkansas. It is somewhere over 50%. And yes, there are, you know, they try to correlate it to the number of injuries due to firearms. But the fact of the matter is that we're talking about what the trends and what people find important. And if you're from a state like Kentucky, if you're from a state like Tennessee, if you're from a state like Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, okay, those states are not going to connect with a Hillary Clinton. And that's one of the reasons that these polls, even if this poll, which we analyzed earlier, was correct, it doesn't mean anything. It actually means, first of all, that people are not actually looking at where the votes are, who are the people that are voting for Donald Trump or for Bill Clinton, for Hillary Clinton, or for Al Gore. The issues that are very relevant to voters in Alaska are probably irrelevant to voters in Louisiana. And I'll just figure, but the thing is that people have to remember that every politician sees themselves as a superstar. And I was thinking about this earlier when I was deciding how to shoot this video. Who do you think is Bill Clinton best, who's the best athlete that you can metaphorize him for? Being the superstar of the 1990s, you would have to say, even if you don't like Bill Clinton, that he was kind of like a Michael Jordan. He was at the top nearly every year, or he was near the top if he wasn't at the top every single year. He was the person that you were talking about, and his opponent was basically some sort of sideshow, whether it was Newt Gingrich in the House, or it was Bob Dole, or it was Ken Starr. All these people were they were like satellites to his sun, and that was the Michael Jordan effect. But you look at some of these other people. Okay, I would say that today Donald Trump is a superstar. And there is no Michael Jordan of today's age in basketball. Even if you think that LeBron James is Michael Jordan, you can't compare his popularity to Michael Jordan's. Michael Jordan in his time was the sun, the moon, and the stars of the NBA. So who do you compare Hillary Clinton to? Who do you compare a lot of these other Democrats to? Well, I would have to say Carmelo Anthony. I'd have to say, if you're talking about baseball, somebody like Lance McCutcheon, who, no offense to Lance McCutcheon, nothing against him or Carmelo, but these are people who they bring their teams to a certain level that, they have good individual performances, but they're not superstars. They're very much just people who are good players on very, average to less than average teams. And that's really, I think, the way that you look at how the Democratic Party began to lose states like Tennessee, how the Democratic Party began to lose states that were once very competitive, because instead of focusing on ideas and team efforts and really what's needed for the situation, what's needed and what the strategy to win, not the strategy to garner the most donations, not the strategy to win primaries, because Hillary Clinton has no problem winning primaries. If you go to a state like Georgia, registered Democrats definitely would like Hillary Clinton, because a Georgia Democrat likely grew up working on a Hillary Clinton campaign or supporting or for you know, if you're going further back, for a Bill Clinton campaign, supporting Barack Obama. A lot of the people who are veteran Democrats who have supported the party over the last few decades, of course they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton, because they identify with the organization. They identify with these people. But the average person on the street does not see it this way. They look at Hillary Clinton, and what they probably see is somebody who simply is so out of touch and is kind of, you know, an inflated superstar, an overpaid athlete, so to speak, like Carmelo Anthony, that they're willing to vote for somebody else, even somebody that they're not entirely enthusiastic about. So please like this video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. I will be probably back in a couple days. And also subscribe to my live streaming channel, Razor Ray Live Wounds, and have a great rest of your week.